Hi again, this is Dr. Eric Thomas speaking for Nutmeg Dermatology, wishing you best health, especially of your skin. Today I'd like to talk about one of the most serious skin cancers that we see. There are others that are quite common, but they're fairly rare. You no doubt know that I'm going to talk about melanomas. Well, how do they differ from basal cell carcinomas and squamous cell carcinomas? These are all skin cancers. Basal and squamous cell carcinomas are so common, millions of them, that they're not even officially counted, but they are the number one and number two cancer of all types. Melanoma is not rare. It's down to the top 10, give or take, but it plays by a different set of rules. It has a different rule book, you might say. Why is that so? So here we go into the anatomy of the skin. If you were to count the cells that make up the upper layer of skin, the epidermis, mostly 95% of them would be the cells that give our skin its structure. They're called keratinocytes. If you were blind and you felt the skin of ethnicities, different colors of people, they'd all feel pretty much the same. It's only when you have vision that you can see the difference in color. That difference in color is due to the roughly 5% of cells that are called melanocytes. These cells interact with the other cells. They sort of interdigitate and they work together to produce whatever skin color you have. If they're asleep at the switch, people have vitiligo, which is a loss of color. But in any event, because melanocytes are a totally different cell type, they, as I've said, play by a different set of rules. They, for example, seem to be born with a passport in their back pocket. That's not good if you have a cancer. You like the cancer to stay put in the same place, like Mr. Rogers staying in his neighborhood, and that's what the non-melanoma basal squamous cells do. But unfortunately, if melanomas are allowed to stay around for too long, they get on that big jet plane and unfortunately go elsewhere in your body, off of the lungs, the bones, the brain. Bad news. There are other things that are different about the rule book, the playbook. Age. Well, depending upon skin color, location, and all that, most people develop non-melanoma skin cancers, later in life. I like to say when they're more mature. Could be younger. I've seen people in their 20s who are blonde, who work at boat yards, who have non-melanoma skin cancers in their 20s, but usually it's more 50, 60, 70 and going up from there. Not so with melanomas. Oh yeah, they can occur, they do occur later in life, but they're pretty common in the 20s and 30s. In fact, they're, I believe, the number one cancer for 25 to 30-year-old women anyway, or at least used to be. So it's not uncommon for me to see someone coming in wanting a full body exam because a coworker or spouse or loved one just died. I had a woman who was 23 come in for a full body exam, and she was fine. But when I asked, I said, gee, it's unusual. This is the third or fourth one you've had. Most people don't think of coming in. You get a triple gold star. Turned out that her mother had died when she was 3 years old. Her mother died of a melanoma. So she was a true believer in regular skin examinations. That's an important thing we should talk about, perhaps in a separate issue. So how else do melanomas differ from non-melanoma skin cancers? Location. Well, melanomas can occur, of course, on the face, shoulders, back, high sun areas. They're a little more common on the back of the legs where people get sunburns. But because there is a genetic tendency, melanomas also tend to show up in unusual locations. There's a type of mole called a dysplastic mole. It's not a melanoma, but it looks a little like one. And dysplastic moles, which are also familial in nature, tend to turn into melanomas a bit more. They, as other types, can be seen in unusual areas. For example, the soles of the feet. Took one off a woman who thought it was just a fungus she picked up camping. Between toe webs. There's an urban legend, don't quote me on this, but many people who know about Bob Marley, not personally, claim that yes, indeed, he did die from a melanoma starting underneath a toenail. I don't know if he did or didn't, but I was at a bicycle trip not long ago with three relatives, three people from Australia. Two of them were docs. And they told me about a friend back in Australia who had a suspicious mole on a toe, and they just took the toe right off. And that's not a bad thing, because melanomas down there can be very aggressive. Where else have I seen melanomas? I think, remember a 20, 21-year-old woman who came in with a little suspicious mole at the margin of her forehead and scalp. Her mother had noticed it. We took it off, put a few sutures in, good results. It took the pathologist 3 weeks to figure out that it was just a highly suspicious mole, not yet a melanoma, but I'm pretty sure that if that had been left there for another few months or year, it could have killed her. So I did put in a word for moms at that point in time. So, it's important to look at your back, in your scalp, behind the ears, toe webs, areas you may not be able to see. We do offer full body exams respecting your privacy and what you want examined and not. Many people want to have genitalia examined in another office, but we do offer it and have nurse practitioners as well as myself. So you can literally save your life with a well-performed full body exam. Now your family doc's great, and I'm sure that they're supposed to look at your skin, but let's face it, you go in with cough, cold, high blood pressure. It's kind of hard to devote a visit entirely to the skin. Also, we use a simple handheld instrument called a dermoscope or dermatoscope, which in studies has improved the accuracy of looking at pigmented lesions about 15%. I could go on and on. I was involved in research a few years ago about one in Europe that utilizes a grid of electrical wires and checks out the electrical conductivity of suspect lesions. I don't think they're selling it in the States yet. I'll certainly look into it if I get a chance to. In any event, we try to keep up on these things. And if you don't look, you don't see. If you don't see, you lose 6 months or a year. I'm going to tell you, you pick up a melanoma early, it is 99% curable. You wait a year or so, and it may be 50-50 at best. So let's be honest with one another and see if we could just sort of look at one another's backs and make sure that all is going as well as it can. With your best interests at heart, this is Dr. Thomas from Nutmeg Dermatology. Take care.